What the fuck? Okay. I did not push record. Spirit turned on my camera. So I guess that means I'm starting. That's crazy. It's twice that's happened to me. That my camera just turns on and starts recording. So I got my fire, asking Grandmother Fire to hold space, transmute anything that comes up that is no longer serving and ready to be held and transmuted by the fire. My sage, my beautiful sage here. Ooh, and it just caught right on fire. The last video, sometimes I ask for Spirit to make its presence known. And there was a beautiful, I would call it an angel of light, that came across from behind me forward. And then there were several more beams of light, you might call them, angles of light, angels of light, that came across my video, Mormon Masons Part 2. Spirit definitely showed itself right at the beginning, and I believe in signs. I believe that there's nothing wrong with asking for a sign and asking Creator, Creatrix to show a sign. Now, my Mormon self believed that signs were wrong. It was wrong to ask for a sign from God, Heavenly Father, Creator, Heavenly Mother, whoever you want to acknowledge as something bigger than myself. I was told the story in my youth about Joseph Smith saying that if we ask for signs, we are sinners, unworthy. If we have to ask for a sign, then that means, we don't have enough faith. And it's not okay to ask for a sign. It took me leaving the church and a lot of reconstruction on my belief system to understand that there is nothing wrong to ask Spirit for a sign. And if you read in the Bible, it says that, the stars are in the heavens and they are there for signs. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking for a sign. And I believe I got one, my camera turning on before I was ready. And I definitely got signs in my previous video. It was the biggest sign I've ever, beam of light go across my space that I've ever had before. I know where to set my sage. So today I'm talking about more of my father's secrets. It's kind of the Mormon Masons Part 3. My grandfather was recruited into Masonry, Mormon Masonry. My father was also recruited into Masonry while he was at Hill Air Force Base in the 1950s. And he was a part of top secret government programs, operations. In my youth, so he worked at Thiokol from 1959 until 1986 is when he retired, after Space Shuttle Challenger blew up in the aftermath. he retired and was immediately hired back on for a lot more money. And he worked another 2 years to help overhaul the things that went wrong that led to the space shuttle disaster, helped oversee the space shuttle, program that they had to change. And my father wrote a book before he died, and I read parts of his book, just little tiny quotes, in the last video, and I plan on using it as a reference as well for this video. So I came into this world in 1968, and my father was, hang on, just that. So my father was already well established at Thiokol. He worked in manufacturing, he worked in training people, but when I came along, his biggest job switched, I guess, around 1979, and he became the safety manager. So he was over safety over the entire plant. He was over the fire department, he was over training, and he was over security. So he had a huge job from 1979 until 1986. And so I have fond memories of going to Thiokol as a child and seeing these enormous rocket boosters, the process of how they were made. Every family day we went and toured the plant, and that was something I looked forward to every year. I loved that my father built rockets. I mean, that was just, it was cool. And every time the space shuttle went up, he would bring home the flight sticker for me. So these are all the flights between 1981 and 1991. So these are all the space shuttle flights in a 10-year period. And I had most of these little patches that go with the flight. This one is the Challengers. They are packed away somewhere. I don't know which box or where they're at the moment, but it was something I kept from my childhood. Like I said, I loved that my dad built rockets, and I remember watching the space shuttle when it was in orbit coming over our house. We would get out late at night, or whenever the time was that it would fly over, and have our binoculars and look. I've just always been fascinated by the stars and the sky, and it was really cool that my dad built something that got so close to the heavenly bodies. I was really proud of my dad for that. So my dad's career, I said this in the last video, he's one of those people that has, for a time, he has really high connections in the Pentagon. Now that he's working for NASA, and Thiokol, working closely with NASA for the space shuttle program, he has contacts high up at NASA. And right before Space Shuttle Challenger exploded, it exploded at the end of January. The 1st of December, end of November, that time period, my father flew. He part of his job, he wasn't over safety just for his plant, but he helped all the plants that belonged to Thiokol put in place safety guidelines. And my father got a lot of awards for the work that he did with safety, which is very ironic with what happened. You know, safety was always supposed to be his number one concern. And so right before Space Shuttle Challenger exploded, my father met with some very high officials back east in Washington, I believe. They met in Washington, D.C. He met with the NASA director, and he does put this meeting in his book, if it ever gets published and sees the light of day. So he met with the director of engineering, the general manager. My father, because of his status of being a Mormon Mason, and it's a secret organization, right? Most of the people my father worked with were LDS. They were members of the church. Not all of them were also Masons. And the man that would eventually take the fall for the disaster, the main person responsible, was the general manager over Thiokol. His name was Jerry Mason, and he's also dead at the so him and my father had a rivalry, you could say. The two of them butted heads with everything. The general manager did not like my father. My father thought the general manager was an idiot and did not know how to manage people. So obviously there was tension and they didn't get along. And I heard stories about that most of my senior year. Most of my high school years. As soon as Jerry Mason got put in as the general manager, him and my father clashed. And so Jerry Mason got wind of this meeting that was going to happen with my dad and the director of NASA. And because he's general manager, he thinks he needs to be at this meeting as well. This is, like I said, about 2 months before the space shuttle blows up. So he comes to the meeting, and I'm going to quote from my dad's book. We walked into the meeting. The director of engineering turned to my general manager, which is Jerry Mason, and said, "Why are you here? We did not invite you. We just invited John." It's my father. And then he goes on to say, "Well, since you are," this is Jerry Mason. He answers, "Well, since you are meeting with John at this level, I felt I should be here, and I have a presentation for you." This is how narcissistic, he's just as narcissistic as my dad. And the general manager said to him, "No, stop the presentation. That is not why he's here. We don't want a presentation. Forget about a presentation." They were there to talk to my dad. I believe in my heart they had already had communication, but it was probably like the final time they were going to meet before the accident, the disaster. So he says, "I was going to ask John questions, but since you came with him, I will ask you one question, and I want you to be truthful. Have you ever changed any decision that John has made?" Meaning my father. Has the general manager ever changed decisions that my father made? The general manager, according to my dad, started to hem and haw a bit because he knew already the answer. The director already knew the answer, that he did change decisions. He did override my father at times. So he answered honestly and said, "Well, yes, I guess I have." So the general manager of NASA tells this to the general manager of Thiokol. He says, "Let me make this very clear to you. Whatever John says is his decision on something. It is NASA's decision as well. Don't ever overrule him again on anything. Do you understand? And then he said this meeting is concluded and dismissed him both once the general manager agreed that he understood. So before this meeting took place, my dad had a letter. They wanted to restructure the organization and move the space shuttle program from the engineering department to the safety organization, which my father was over. The general manager refused to do that. Jerry Mason refused to do that, or delayed doing it. I don't know what his motive was, but at that time he refused. That would be giving my father way too much control and power. My father already had tons of control and power, so to me that seems like a ridiculous thing. But I always thought Jerry Mason was a part of the Mormon Masons. And it wasn't until I got my dad's book and read his version of things, read the truth of things, that I realized Jerry was the scapegoat. Jerry was the fall guy. Jerry didn't know shit, basically. And this meeting kind of proves that. And truthfully, I think they knew what Jerry Mason was going to do. That he was not going to move it under my father. My father claims he would have never allowed the space shuttle to fly if he had been in charge. And he would have been in charge if Jerry Mason had followed through on that letter and moved the program under my dad. But I also believe, honestly, that they knew he would never do that. You know how narcissists are going to act. And when power is taken away and given to somebody else, that hurts. I think Jerry Mason reacted exactly like they knew he would, and it worked out perfectly for him to take the fall. So I want to quote what my dad says about the Space Shuttle Challenger's explosion, because wait. I want to back up just a little bit to 1986 before I read what he said. My dad knew 100%. My dad knew it was going to blow up. And I believe NASA, these high-level officials, knew 100% it was going to blow up. That was the intention. The space shuttle program never had an accident that took life in space, that took life in flight. This disaster was absolutely the first time that people met their demise while in flight. Yes, they had accidents and lost life on the ground, but this was the first time it happened in air and with a civilian on board. Those two things are a very big deal. And I know there's conspiracy theories out there saying, oh, there was no people on board. That's a rabbit hole to go down for sure. The astronauts didn't actually die, but they're alive and well. You know, I would love for that to be true. I hate the fact that, 7 people lost their lives in front of millions of us watching it happen live. But whether that shuttle was empty or whether it was full, the impact is the same. We all, watching it, believed the people were there. And that's what they wanted. They wanted that emotional, energetic impact That's why there was a TV on, and it was live. It was broadcast live in so many elementary schools, junior highs, high schools. My father fucking knew this was going to blow up. They delayed and delayed and delayed until they got the conditions absolutely perfect, which was freezing and ice. And there was no way that O-ring was going to hold. They knew exactly what they were doing in delaying the launch date to the 28th of January, 1986. And it was all in place for America, and around the world, I'm sure other places watched. 73 seconds into that flight, it blows apart, right? And I will never forget the little devil horns that came out of that against that perfectly blue sky. It's a 9/11 kind of moment. I mean, our country really hasn't faced, at that time in 1986, our country hadn't faced anything quite like that. And the impact was exactly what they wanted. That sadness, that fear. They fed off of our reaction, and it was in our classrooms. It impacted the children greatly to see a teacher blow up. And part of me was, once I found all this out, a lot of this I found out only 2 years ago. It's only been 2 years since I have been able to put all the pieces together. But I was really angry at my dad that he didn't at least, I know he couldn't warn me. I know he couldn't keep me at home and break up my normal routine, but it still does make me angry that he knew this was going to happen. And he showed no remorse for it in the aftermath. So I watched along as a senior with, millions of other school kids and parents and the nation as the shuttle blew up. So here's what my dad writes about it. It's just a tiny little paragraph in his, 150 pages book. He wrote, "It was to be another routine launch of the space shuttle, the morning of January 28th, 1986, but it wasn't. 73 seconds after liftoff, the Space Shuttle Challenger exploded as people across the country watched. 7 astronauts, 1 school teacher from New Hampshire died. That night, President Ronald Reagan changed his State of Union address to a speech intended to comfort a grieving nation." Oh my God, I did not realize. Okay, that's another little layer. I did not realize the State of the Union address was for that day. That's just another little tiny piece of proof. They planned the explosion, and they planned it to happen during the day of the State of the Union. One day before the Challenger was to be launched, a telephone meeting occurred between officials at the Marshall Flight Space Center and Thiokol personnel. The top person representing Thiokol was the general manager, Jerry Mason, the man who had refused to move flight engineering safety under my organization, the man who did not want me making decisions that NASA would back. He was now tasked with answering questions along with engineers regarding the safety of flying the Challenger. The discussion involved an O-ring on the booster motors. Officials at the Marshall Flight Center wanted to know if it was safe to fly or should the Challenger flight be postponed. So again, like I said, this is the day before. They're in this meeting that would go into the nighttime. A really, really good book about this is Truth, Lies, and O-Rings. Alan McDonald, he was one of the engineers that fought like hell to get them to stop. And his life was messed up and impacted so greatly because he knew, the engineers knew. There was at least 4 engineers. I don't remember all their names. I think one was Bob and Roger and Alan. Those are 3. But they tried so hard to get the general manager and the other, there was at least 2 other men that were, you know, making the final decision. They worked so hard trying to get them to stop. And he says it in the book. He's talking about this meeting. He says, the rest of the seats taken by Morton Thiokol employees, Jerry Mason, Senior Vice President and General Manager of Wasatch Operations, Calvin Wiggins, Vice President and General Manager of the Space Division, Joe Kilminster, that's the one I was trying to remember, Vice President of Space Booster Programs, and Robert Lund, Vice President of Engineering. And then Don was there, and Roger, he was the senior engineer of the O-ring seal person. These people were in a meeting trying to determine whether or not they should fly. Now, there's so many good things in this book about the cover-up that happened after, and why they really wanted this to fly. I had marked it. Let me see. It was just a little paragraph I wanted to read. This man who tried to stop it, Alan, he said, I was the lone representative of management, either at Thiokol or NASA, who opposed the launch. I was the director of the Space Shuttle Solid Rocket Motor Project and the senior management representative of Morton Thiokol at the Kennedy Space Center at the time of launch. That's the man who wrote this book. That's the man who cared about these people's lives and did not want to see the launch happen. And he also says a really interesting piece in here about how they the question that those men, those general managers, the 4 of them, kept being asked was, can you prove that it won't, no, can you prove that it will blow up? It was the opposite of what they normally ask. They normally want to know that things won't go wrong. Can you prove things will not go wrong? Can you prove that it's going to be safe and fly safe? That was not how they worded it to them. Can you prove that it won't blow up? Can you prove that it's not going to blow up? And they couldn't prove that. They couldn't guarantee that it would blow up. But they were pretty sure. Most of the people were pretty sure it would. But in the terms, the legal terms of can you prove that? It was no, we can't prove it. And so they were pressured, and the engineers kicked out of the room, and it came down to those 4 general managers, those 4 important people that I just read off their names. Jerry Mason being the one getting the final call, but he did not sign it. It was, I think the one with the last name with the K is the one that actually signed off on the launch. And those men were the scapegoats, because my father, the engineers, the people in NASA that were pushing for it to fly knew it was going to explode. So against their recommendations, back to my dad's book, the general manager and his right-hand manager decided the Challenger should fly. And then my dad says, the rest, as they say, is history. We knew what was going to happen. My dad knew what was going to happen. But at the time I'm going through it, I think my dad was like Alan. I honestly believed my father really believed in his head that he could have stopped it. That was the show he put on for me, and that is what he said repeatedly. If Jerry Mason had just done what NASA had told him to do and moved that under my control, I would have said no. The space shuttle would not have flown that day, and those people would still be alive. But they knew Jerry, with my dad's rivalry, would never do that. Jerry did exactly what they wanted him to do, which was to keep it where it was, to be the fall guy, and take the heat. And then my dad went on a fucking vacation, and he talks about that. This happens, and him and his boss, after him and the general manager have a big blowout after the space shuttle explodes. And my dad goes home, takes my mom, and goes on vacation. Goes to southern Utah to think about work and what he needs to do. My dad 100% benefited from this accident that he knew was going to take place. So he leaves town right after this big disaster, and he's the person over safety. He goes on vacation, and he says, "While on vacation, my wife and I talked at great length about my work. I said I might not be ready to retire, but that I had to do it, and I would turn in my resignation as soon as I returned to the office. My intent was to be out of the plant by July, the 1st of July. I would not continue to work for this general manager." Yeah, the general manager, and he knows this, is going to get his ass fired. He's going to go, okay, he didn't get his ass fired. He was told to leave. He was told to early retire, just like my dad was early retiring. But my dad was doing it as a shiny hero. He got to retire. The general manager retired in a walk of shame. So my dad gets home from vacation. He calls the corporate office, just like he said he was going to do, gives them his resignation. And of course, the people not in the know don't want him to do that. It's a little bit of a panic because they're in this investigation, they're in this giant mess, and here is their safety head of safety leaving, giving his several months notice, because this is the first part of February, and he's going to leave the 1st of July. So he tells them, and he takes his resignation to the general manager, and he doesn't say anything to my dad. They just, I think they both know the one is going to go down. Jerry Mason's going to fall, and my dad is going to rise. My dad is going to greatly benefit. What happens next is corporate, Thiokol headquarters, corporate, calls my dad and offers him a 2-year consulting contract. They don't want him to leave and go to a competitor. They want him to stay and clean up the mess that Thiokol is in, because it was their fault. So he listens to the proposal, and then he counter proposals. He says, I will do it with this and this and this and this. He throws in some more conditions. My dad made a lot of money off of that. He signs that contract and he retires July 1st, is hired back on July 2nd as a contractor, and he works for 2 years, 2 more years, consulting and helping get the space shuttle program back in place. And he goes on to share some stories. He did save people's lives. There were 4 people in Thiokol that would have died had he not insisted on certain safety changes, and it ended up saving people's lives. But everything my dad did benefited himself. So it was always what's in it for me. I didn't know this growing up. I didn't know this while I'm living through it. So my dad, I graduate from high school. My dad retires from Thiokol. He gets this contract, makes a shit ton of money. And then in Henderson, Nevada, PepCon explodes. And so he's kind of double booked. He's still on his contract with Thiokol, but he also is contracted to understand what happened and what went wrong to cause the PepCon explosion. My dad loved things that exploded, and how to fix it. And it was like a puzzle to him. What made it explode, and how can he recreate it? What were the conditions? My dad was a very smart man. So those 2 cases kind of overlapped. The space shuttle finally got back on its feet and launched the same month that my dad was done working for Thiokol. They launched again in September, the end of September 1988. And that's the month my dad's contract expired. So he helped them redo the space shuttle program. So I'm still naive, but it is, for most of my life. I leave the church at 42. My mom dies in 2014. I have memories coming back. I learn about Mormon Masons. I learn about my grandfather being a Mormon Mason, and that is confirmed to me by the Mason historian, a Mason historian in the state of Utah. He confirms to me that my grandfather my grandfather was dead at the time, was a very influential high person up in this, what I call Mormon Masons. Other people would just maybe use the word Mason. They're not Freemasons, though there is a very distinct difference between the two. And I find it very interesting that the church just put out a brand new essay about Masonry this week. Like, I just heard about it today, and I don't think that's a coincidence. I think there's a lot of people bringing up the fact about the roots of Mormonism and Masonry and how they go hand in hand. So it's 2014, 2015, my dad tells me he knows how to control people, and not just control people, but mind control people. He's dead serious about it. And the fact that my grandfather was this Mason made me wonder about my father being a Mason. And I start to go down the rabbit hole about what my dad did for work. I start to go down the rabbit hole about the Space Shuttle Challenger explosion. And I don't have this book for another 8 years. But I did find some stuff. I found the theory about the astronauts being alive. I found the theory that it was actually a sacrifice, a free Masonic sacrifice. And it was, my dad got diagnosed with cancer in May of 2016, and he only lived another 7 months. And this was right before that. So this was spring of 2016. I decided, I've been researching for like a good 9 months, 8 months, and I want to confront my father specifically about the Space Shuttle Challenger, and about Freemasons possibly having a hand in it and wanting to sacrifice these people. And I did have the opportunity to confront my dad and ask him what he thought about that theory. And he did not deny it. He didn't say, you know, that's ridiculous, or that's far-fetched, or that's conspiracy. The look on his face was more like a cunning fox. Like, okay, maybe she has this little piece of information, but she doesn't know what I know. And he was silent for a really good long while, you know, like he was thinking or contemplating. And I'm like, what? Do you agree or not agree? I mean, and he's like, that's a really, really interesting theory. I was like, you want to elaborate on that? Because I'm coming to him with this information because I still believe my dad was not in on it. I still believe my dad's words that he would have stopped it if it had been under his organization. He would have stopped it. And so that was really the first thing out of my mouth. I'm like, you could not have stopped it. I've been researching and I've been doing this, and I believe it was a sacrifice, Dad. And I said, these people were supposed to blow up. And if you research it, if you read this book, I don't see how you can come to any other conclusion than they knew it was going to blow up. It was intentional. The cover up that happened after, but I'm confronting my dad I'm still really naive because I don't realize in that moment that everything he had told me from that moment it happened up through the next 30 years, we're past 30 years of the Challenger at this point, has been a lie. My father has lied to me to my face, saying that if it had been under him, he would have stopped it. No, not true. This man would have stopped it. This man showed remorse for all the people that died and the tragedy that it really was. My dad never shed a tear over these men and women that died. So I had my chance to confront my dad, but I was still in the dark. I was still believing that he was a good guy. When he looked me in the eye and said that he was not a Freemason, Grandpa was not a Freemason, he could do that because they weren't Freemasons. They had true Masonry. They were Mormon Masons. And they had been recruited into a secret society, and the first rule is you don't talk about the secret society. And Mormons are good at keeping fucking secrets. And my dad was too. My dad, in the video before this, Mormon Masons Part 2, my dad reveals a story in his book that he kept a secret. We knew he was blackballed at Hill Air Force Base. That story he told very proudly. He was blackballed, but you know, he was the one that the blackballing didn't work. Blackballing means you don't get raises, you get kicked out, you don't get new jobs. My dad got promoted. you know. So his narcissistic personality wanted to say, look at me, I was blackballed and I beat the system. And that's what we all thought until I read his book. And then so many things fell into place. So my dad gets cancer and dies. Up until, okay, so I am probably going to go a few minutes over on this one. I tried to keep him around an hour, but this one's probably going to be an hour and 15 minutes. Because I just want to touch on the disowning. So my dad gets cancer in May, and in June, there's this big to-do in Thiokol. They're testing one of the new rocket boosters, and they're asking all the people who are still alive that were a part of the space shuttle program to come. And my father got a special invitation to go to that, and that's one of the last good pictures I have of my dad. He went to Thiokol. He got to shake hands with the current astronauts. This was in 2016. And, you know, he was back home in Thiokol, and he was in the spotlight. It was a very happy moment for my dad. And then he came to Salt Lake, got cancer treatments. He had a very, very rare type of cancer. Like 20 people in the United States might have this cancer. And Huntsman Cancer Research Institute wanted to use my dad like a guinea pig. They wanted to experiment on his cancer. Or they wanted biopsies. It was a really hard way to go. My mother died of cancer, so did my father. But my father's death was pretty horrific. And that's sad to say that I think it was fitting with how he lived his life. But up until November of 2016, we still don't know, as his ex-Mormon children, if he's going to cut us out of the will completely, if he's going to leave us anything, or if he's going to, you know, we just have no idea what his wishes are. And we confront him. He agrees to a family meeting with him and my 5 siblings. And we get on a conference call, and he refuses to tell us what his wishes are. So we have to wait until he dies, he passes. And then after the funeral, at the reading of the will, he did not completely cut us out, the ex-Mormons, but he cut out the one sister who was still Mormon, even though she was in a nursing home. So he justified not leaving her anything because of that. But she was his only Mormon child. It was a mess. My father died, and it was a disaster. It was 2017. And it was 9 months later that I had my first plant medicine ceremony. And peyote, grandfather peyote, helped me in so many ways to heal and find forgiveness on a level. Forgiveness for me through this process has been like an onion. I think I've forgiven everything, and then there's been something that shows its face and is like, no, you still are carrying a little bit. Let me show you. Life does that. It triggers us and helps us see where we're not complete in our forgiveness or in our healing. So from 2017 through 2022, it was a journey, and that's part of my Mormon to mystic journey that I will be sharing. But what is significant for this part was my sister. So my family of origin shattered. at the reading of the will. And my sister, who was my father's executor, there was a falling out with her. But by 2022, and plant medicine, determination, my spiritual path did find reconciliation and forgiveness. Our relationship is not the same as it was, but so what? I mean, we have one again. We're back in each other's lives, and we can talk. And that happened in 2022. 2023 comes around, and my spiritual path has taken me down some really incredible places, and my mediumship, talking to spirit, connecting to spirit, that gift has grown. And my father starts coming to me in ways that I recognize, like turning on the camera for me. That was so funny how that happened. Turning on the TV, turning on a radio, turning on a light. He was just in my presence in the month of August in 2023. And it was enough to, every time that happened, I would ask him to leave, and I would shoo his spirit out. But finally, once my heart was a little more soft, I sat still and got quiet and asked, okay, what is it you need? Why are you doing this? Why are you coming into my space? What does it matter? Like, I thought I'd forgiven you. I thought this was over. And very clearly, it came to me to ask my sister for a copy of his book. He wanted me to read his book. And at first I'm like, yeah, right, Dad. Like, Tina's not going to give me that book. My sister's not going to give me that book. I didn't believe she would, because it was also part of why our family shattered. The book was a huge, it was like the match that lit the dynamite. That's how I saw it. And I didn't know if I even wanted to read it. That was kind of my intention, was to never read that damn book. So it was so persistent. Reach out to your sister, get a copy of the book. And so I was like, well, what can it hurt? Fine, I will reach out to my sister. I will ask her, and then it's in her hands whether or not she allows me to read it or not. And it will be out of my hands. So I did reach out to her, and shockingly, she's like, it's, a rough draft. It's not finished, but you can read it. I was like, oh my God. I mean, I was very, very grateful at that point in time. Like, it took a lot of healing. I don't think I could have read his book before that moment. So he got my attention. He got this into my life. And because my dad started coming into my space, it got me thinking. And the biggest question I had for my dad was, did you know? Did you know about the space shuttle blowing up? That was the burning question that I really, really wanted. And in this time that my dad starts appearing in my life again through subtle ways, that's when I get this book and start reading this book. And it brought up so much anger. And it really, really showed me the difference between a man who was truly mourning the loss of those people and my father, who greatly benefited from the loss of those people. Like, both of their lives completely changed. He got demoted. He got punished because he was the whistleblower. He was the one that pointed out the cover-up that was happening, and his life was ruined for it. Maybe ruined is a strong word, but he definitely suffered. my father benefited. My father got promoted. My father rose in glory. You know, he got to say, oh, if I'd been in charge, it wouldn't have happened. And that was all bullshit. So my burning question reading my dad's book was, did he know? And I opened the PDF, and the first, okay, Spirit's messing with me again. Hang on. There it is. The first page, the title of the book for my dad is called What the Rocket Man Knew. And this is the picture. What the Rocket Man Knew. Picture of my dad with his can of root beer, because Mormons can't drink real beer, sitting at his desk, his computer, watching, you know, everything burn and explode in the background. My sister, a different sister, the one that he cut out of the frickin' will, is the one that drew the picture of my dad. She gave it to him as a gift. It's kind of a joke, because my dad was always handling explosions. He was the safety engineer. My dad fucking knew. And as soon as I opened that PDF and saw that picture, my question was answered, and I hadn't read a word of his book. What the Rocket Man Knew. Rocket Man is my dad's CB handle. My dad was the Rocket Man because he helped, you know, build the rockets. And he knew. He knew. My dad, I think it was a piece of forgiveness that my dad really wanted, and he couldn't get that without me knowing the whole story. And so the last 2 years have been a journey of finding that forgiveness for my father. So his book's about 150-ish, 160 pages, and there were so many things reading it, like the Candy Bomber story, like that answered how my dad was not a Freemason, but a Mason. How my dad became a Mason. It answered that question. That was also a burning question within myself. We had no idea about that story, and he even said it in the book. You know, he had never told a soul other than my sister, who he dictated this book to. So my sister knew, but like I said, Mormons are good at keeping secrets. He told her not to tell. He told her to not tell a lot of things, and but he put it in the book. And it was there for me to read the connection, how he became recruited, how he went from being blackballed and supposed to be exiled from Hill Air Force Base to receiving promotions and top secret clearance. It's because my dad was a Mormon Mason. My dad was a Mason, a secret society. My dad was a part of this secret society that, you know, doesn't exist. But does. You just can't, you know, go sign up for it. If you're not special, if you're not recruited, you know, you're going to stay in the dark. My dad knew. The year my dad got sick, so I love crystals. I went to a crystal shop, and there's this crystal there in the window, and when I saw it, I knew I had to have it because it looks like a space shuttle. Here's the shuttle, and then this represents for me the rocket booster that my dad built. I saw that crystal in her display, and I'm like, at the time I didn't know, right? My father had this evil streak in him that allowed the people to blow up. But I told her, you know, my father built the boosters for the space shuttle, and this looks just like the space shuttle. I'm like, I have to have this crystal. And the shop lady was like, I knew this crystal was going to go to someone special, because she also thought this looked like the space shuttle, which maybe it's a stretch, but for me, it looks exactly exactly like it. And I did show this to my dad before he died. This was before he got sick in 2016, 2015 maybe. I'm not going to touch on it this time, but I will just also say my dad believed he knew who D.B. Cooper was. He hired a man at Thiokol when he was, safety manager before Space Shuttle exploded. When I was probably 11, 12, 13, that age range, he hired this man, and this man came to our house and had dinner several times. And he was D.B. Cooper's helper. Helped him look for the money several times. And he would stop by our house. My dad has that story in his book, but he was always afraid. That was one of the stories. He was afraid to put and name names. So I don't know if my sister will end up keeping that as a part of the book or not. But there was a connection between D.B. Cooper and Martin Luther King. My dad loved that he knew secrets, that he knew things that nobody else knew. He loved, I think, having that over people, having that, I have something you don't know. I think my dad really got off on that. And I think he kept that secret as long as he could. The fact that he knew the space shuttle was going to blow up and that he profited from it. And you can say you believe in spirits or don't believe in spirits. I don't care what other people think about me. I know the contact I've had when a spirit comes in to my space, and in my experience with mediumship, talking to spirits. That's a Mormon thing. I mean, the Mormon church is founded on talking to spirit. According to Joseph Smith, God the Father, Jesus Christ, came down and appeared in front of him. He was talking to spirits. Yeah. My father, I think he wanted to come clean. I think he wanted me to read this story for a reason, to find the connection of how he got to be a Mason, because he could not be honest with me when he was alive. In many ways, my father was a coward. That was very cowardly, that he could not look me in the eye. Just like when he changed his will and chose to disown me and my siblings in certain ways before he passed, he also could not look me in the eye. And it was like I was looking at a little child. Here I am, a mother of 8. I know what a dishonest child, someone who was holding a secret, looks like. And that is how my father looked in that meeting where we were all together and supposed to discuss his last wishes. And he said, I'm not going to tell you. I'm not going to tell you. He was so childlike in that moment. And I knew he had done something to change the will. And I figured what I thought the big secret would be was that he gave all his money to the church. Because he threatened that many times that he was just going to give all the inheritance that would have come to me and my ex-Mormon siblings to the church. That is a real thing that the church encourages you to do if you have wayward children. Your wayward children don't need your money. Give it to the church. And my dad was seriously considering that. He gave us some crumbs. I'll say that. And he shattered our family. And he knew that's what was going to happen, which is why he could not face us, which is why he couldn't come clean. He was 8 weeks away from dying when we had this, to the day when we had this meeting. And he could not stand up and tell us what he had done. And that is the legacy that my father left. Secrets and, I guess, shame. I think that's why he didn't want to face us, because he couldn't face the shame of it. This is a hard thing to get out. I do have love in my heart for my father, for the man that he was when he was good to me. But I know that that was only one side of him. And there was another side of him that could justify really horrific actions. I think the blood of those astronauts, and I do think they're dead, I think it's on his hands. And I think him sharing this with me, getting my attention, getting me to ask my sister for this book, because that is something I never would have done without my dad. It's prompting. Because my heart was, I didn't want anything at all to do with this book. I did not want to read it. I didn't want to know. And I did kind of secretly hope that it never saw the light of day, that it never got published. Now it doesn't matter to me. She can publish it or not publish it. But I know 100% my dad wanted me to know this, wanted me to have this information. It answered my two most burning questions. How did my dad become a Mason? How the hell that connection happened, and did he know? He knew. He knew the intention was to kill those people. And he benefited from that. A lot of people benefited, not just my dad. There was money to be made in the in that disaster. As most disasters, there is usually someone who benefits, and that's what you got to look at. Who benefits from the pain and the horror? Because somebody does. Most things, they refill themselves in time. Okay. I think I feel complete. This was a big peace weighing on my heart. And I know a lot of people, this isn't for, again, this isn't for likes. This isn't for comments. This is for me. This is my healing. This is also, I think, a way for my father to get some healing and get some peace and take accountability through me sharing this. I'm not sharing this to shame him. I think he felt shame enough. He's dead. He's on the other side, whatever you think that looks like. As a Rosicrucian, I have a very, very clear picture of what the soul goes through in its journey before it reincarnates. And I believe my dad is in that process of working out some soul shit, some soul things, working through some things that he did. At least I hope he is. Before he comes back, it goes another swoop through the loop of life. Yeah. Okay. school's out, summer has started, and my life's going to be chaos. I don't know when I'm going to get to make another video or what I will be led to talk about next. But like I've said many times, it's a spirit-led conversation. It's very much spirit-led while I'm in the moment, and spirit-led as to which topic I choose next. I am glad that I got to share my thoughts on Space Shuttle Challenger's explosion, and I hope it brings some peace to my dad for taking some responsibility through me and my sharing. Just gonna take a moment of silence.